Let's do that for. Just check. Yeah, jump scares. Absolutely, that'd be great. Okay, I think we're finally ready to go. All right, so when you open up the demo, this is what you're going to see. So some of this stuff is basic repetition, but I think it's important. We will get to the cap eventually. I wanted to do a demo that captures everything you need to do for this project. Obviously, it depends on the complexities of your bottles. So here you can see I've traced the sriracha bottle. You can go ahead and hide this when you open it. But I want you to start by editing this sketch. And firstly, you should notice something major is wrong. Does anyone see what's really wrong about this? It's not on the origin. Some of you were off the origin. I wanted to start by showing that if you're off the origin, how to correct it. So the first thing the demo asks you to do is create a bounding box by pressing R, clicking on this top point here, and just dragging the bounding box to kind of match the overall shape of the object. Honestly, you can go a bit beyond because later we're going to have to make it coincident. And again, I have these instructions written down. I'll print them out. I'll let you know when the instructions end. The next thing I ask you to do is take this bounding box and just make it for construction. The reason for that is I already have the traced lines here, so you don't want to end up with double lines, which is some of the errors that some of you ran into. And then we're going to take a line from the bottom of the transfer ring all the way to the left here. You can see those yellow icons. It's telling me that it's going to be horizontal and coincident to the bounding box, and you want that. Anytime you can build in like these relationships as you're sketching, it will save you time in the long run. Once again, we want to change this to for construction. So now we have like our sketch a little bit more controlled, and the reason that I had you create this line is we're now going to move it onto the origin. So we do that by click, drag to select all. Do that again, it seemed to have deselected it. And then clicking on move entities. The way this works is you select a point to move from. So in this case, we want to put this point on the origin. So I'm going to click on this point, and now you'll notice my sketch is tied to my mouse. I'm going to come over to the origin, and I'm going to click on it. Here's where SolidWorks is a bit of a pain in the ass. You'll notice the lines are still blue, and we know that a blue line means what? You are in sketch mode, but it's not restricted. It's not defined. You can click and drag it. So again, in my opinion, by clicking on there, it should make all of these coincident, but I guess the move entities tool doesn't work that way. The way you fix that is simply and stupidly by clicking on this point, dragging it away a little bit, and dragging it back onto the origin. And now you'll notice these have turned black. So now we have a vertical line and a horizontal line on the origin that is starting to define our bottle. The next thing we're going to do the same thing with the bounding box. I'm going to click and drag this until it's on this line and let go. It did not turn black because that's not yet defined. I'm going to click on this line and drag it onto. Another way to do that actually would be to click the line, hold down Control, click on the vertice, and click coincident. And now that line snapped over. So now we have successfully moved our sketch into the right location, and it's at least attached to the origin in some way, shape, or form. The next thing we're going to do is dimension this. It's going to have you dimension the top of the bounding box. Again, it's important to check, right, that this, okay, no, it's good. It is coincident to the bounding box. We know that because this short line in here is black. I'm going to have you define the bounding box. So we have the height. That's for the cap. Now we're going to have the base down here. So again, from the origin down to the base. We're going to go from the center line out to this most extreme widest points. And hopefully, you know, we should see some things happening, like this line turns black. That tells us that it's coincident with this bounding box here. Now the final dimensions I'm going to have you all do is dimension like the bottom of the neck finish. Just this area so that as the bottom changes, hopefully nothing in the lid or the cap area changes. So we're going to do a dimension to the most outer point of the transfer ring. Again, just so it doesn't move on us. And then just this inner point. Again, kind of like in abundance of caution. I think you all can get away with just these few dimensions for the most part when it comes to changing your sizes, okay? You'll see the other thing I'm going to have to dimension is the push-up down here. But in terms of the lid, if you're feeling lazy, provided you can change, like provided nothing else is tied to the cap, you should be able to change the size of the bottle and not have any errors or issues there. So this is my advice. Eventually you will. Yep. Your gut sense is right. You will need to change it. I'll show you in a minute. Hopefully it will be clear. I don't know what I ended up deciding on. Let's check. Oh, no. I gave it to you guys. Yes, I would. So you can always go back and edit your master sketch and put the cap on it, put the lid on it. That's okay. As long as you have a master sketch for them at the top, that's all right. Ideally, you would have it in the same master sketch, but if you have it as a separate sketch, it's okay. I won't take off points for that. I want master sketches, so as long as, yeah. But in terms of efficiency, it'd probably be better to do it as one. I don't blame you if you did it as two, especially with the way I set this project up, having you all revolve just the bottle and ignore the cap. So that's okay if that's the case. The next thing the printout asks you to do is dimension this down here. So we dimension this height. We also like to mention this angle. Again, it's all to kind of, and from the base, so that as the base moves, the push-up moves with it. It also asks that you check for tangencies. So like, the way you can check that is you can always drag and see like, oh, it's not tangent. You can Control Z to get out of that. I also noticed this line came out when I moved it, so we want to make sure that this is coincident to the bounding box. You can see everything kind of moved, but now I can kind of make these tangent. This was also not coincident. So as these things like jump, as you're making these relations, you just need to kind of go in and make some of these corrections. So this should be coincident on here. And again, this can be tangent to this. I forget what else I asked you to do, but I think that's the bare minimum, is having these be tangent. Again, the push-up isn't as critical as long as it's there. And again, the typical height of a push-up is 1/4 inch. I think initially these tangencies weren't in there, so to Anastasia's point, it would look funny without them, but apparently I fixed that for you. So we'll see what happens when we change the dimensions. But I would say like, here's kind of a bare minimum on a simple bottle of what you need to change it. So then we exit the sketch. This is now our master sketch. So if we want to revolve the bottle, the first thing we're going to do is now we're going to create a new sketch on the front plane. So again, that's Alt S. You can right click on this and say select chain. It's a quick way to select this outer profile and click on convert entities or hit C. Now, if the first thing we want to revolve is the bottle, we want to delete the cap out. So here's an important distinction. If I click from the top left and drag to the bottom right, notice where I'm ending it. I'm ending it just above the transfer ring in this line, and I let go. It did not select this line. If I go from right to left and end on that line, you'll notice it selects that line. Do you see that? I think that's true in Illustrator as well. So dragging from left to right, it selects only things that are in the bounding box that are fully in the bounding box. If I select from right to left, it selects anything touching the bounding box. So it's a good way to like dial in your selections. So again, in this case, if I'm deleting just the cap, I'm going to go top left to bottom right, end above just the transfer ring and hit delete. I'm then going to complete the sketch. I can do it by like hiding everything. I can get a line, get this dotted line on the origin so I know I'm on it. I can get a line from here to here. I'm realizing now in my rush to put the sheet together, I forgot to tell you all to copy the push-up. So try not to forget to do that. If you do, it's not a big deal for the demo, but for your work, it's important. So that involves selecting both of these, again, hitting convert entities. Again, Alt-V, using my hotkeys, hides and shows sketches. So now we can go ahead and just hit T for trim entities. It's also right here. And go ahead and delete all of this extra stuff. If you want to be absolutely accurate, it would probably be a good idea to pretend like there's a bit more to the inside of the bottle here, but it's not a necessary step. Again, that's because we're calculating the volume, and like that's technically a more accurate volume. But for me, it's sufficient to just have all of us agree on a volume and then just double it and half it. It doesn't matter. So at this stage, we have the bottle copied over. You can go to features, you can still be in the sketch and click on revolve. Now again, it's prompting you for the axis of revolution. We know it's a closed profile because it's highlighted in blue. If this were white, there might be a double line or there might be an error. So now I can click on this and click the check mark. I have the bottle revolved. Now we repeat the exact same steps. So again, front plane, Alt-S to create a sketch, Alt-N to rotate it so it's facing us, Alt-V to show the master sketch. Here's again where we would go right-click on this and say select chain. You can hit C to copy it. It turns black, or again, convert entities. Now here, I believe in the demo sheet I ask you to drag from right to left this time because we want to select this line, and hit delete to hide that out. Once again, if I hit Alt-V, I hide everything. We want to complete the cap. I can do that by extending these lines. And again, trim tool to get rid of the excess. And then features, revolve. None of this is new to you so far, correct? Actually, sorry. So that said, here is the new step. I mentioned it last class, but this is incredibly important. When you revolve your cap, make sure merge result is not checked. Once again, you think of this as a body of clay. You want your cap to be separate from your bottle. If this is checked, it will merge and become one body of clay. It will throw off your volume calculation. Cool. So hopefully what the beginning of the demo shows you is how to move your sketch, how to set it up. You know what, I forgot to mention, it does have you at some point check that you can change these and see what happens when you change these. So if I change this to 7 and this to 2, does anything blow up? All right, we see something funny happening here. So then in that case, that means this isn't tangent. We need to then change this back to tangent. Also, like, probably this should be tangent to this design-wise, right? Not the end of the world, but this is where funny things like that happen. So, like, if this is your own sketch, that's where you might want to, if you ever do something like that and it blows up, just hit Control-Z, go ahead and dimension the thing that you don't want to change. So in this case, I want this height to stay the same. We can see it turns black, so now I can take this, holding Control, select both, and make it tangent. Okay, happen again, hit Control-Z. So sometimes you just have to keep dimensioning it until that stops. You can plan ahead. There you go, that's what it took. It took 2 extra dimensions there. So you may all have to do that as you adjust this. But by checking this here and now, it allows you to plan ahead for having to change the volume. So let's see now if we can go smaller. So I can also see that maybe here's another potential error where the push-up should probably be defined to the edge so that as the edge grows, the push-up grows, and vice versa. As it gets too small, this comes in. So like, for example, I can dimension this to be about, maybe let's see what a 1/2 inch looks like. But yeah, that's pretty good. Who knows, you may have issues where this gets really big, so you may need to dimension this as well. Again, as you make changes, whatever you see goes wrong, hit Control-Z and dimension it to kind of make it stop happening. So now let's see if, before we are at 1.3, let's see if I can make this 1.1 and just see, does everything rebuild? Everything looks okay, except here, so this has overshot. So that could be fixed by, you know, moving this down, or maybe this is a bad, in retrospect, based on what I'm seeing now, this is actually not a good dimension to have. It's probably better to have this dimension. So again, that's wrong on the sheet. So these are just things to be aware of, right, that you can change in your bottle. Again, so if we tried too big, we can try too small. Let's see if this works going down to 3. Now, of course, all of you that have like bumps and ridges in your bottle, you are going to have to make some design decisions when you make these new size bottles. by either deleting some of the bumps or adding more. I would say it's more going to be an issue on the smaller volume because you need to delete them out. On the bigger one, if you just have straight flat areas, that's okay. But again, does everyone understand the importance of this exercise of changing the bounding box? And this exercise of changing it and seeing what happens and then hitting Control Z and correcting for it and then trying again is like how you test your master sketch to make sure it's good. Go ahead. Yeah. So now that I've gone through this exercise, I saw what failed, I corrected it. I'm now going in, I'm going to set this back to what it was. It's 6.55. And I believe this was 1.31. Now I know this is robust. I can go in and finish my file. And now when I need to go in and check the volume and create a new bottle, hopefully my life has been made easier because I went through that trouble setting up my master sketch right. So you all of you had your 3 bottles built for Monday. It is a good idea if you haven't yet at this point to kind of do that dry run, that test on your master sketch. So that's why I wanted to start the demo by saying, here's a sketch that's off the origin, here's how you correct it, and here's how you check it for what's coming in the project. If things like end up looking funny, make sure that they have the right relationship, whether it's a tangency, make sure that it's dimensioned so that it doesn't drop or move out of the way. It's not that you have to dimension everything, you just have to check that you can change the overall width and depth of the bottle portion, and the rest should fix itself. Again, it's a little bit more complex if you have ridges. I think each of you maybe have just like one bottle with a ridge. That will probably be your most difficult bottle. Again, you can make design decisions on deleting out some of those ridges when you make the smaller bottle. There's other things we can talk about of like how to set it up so the ridges like are a dimension of, I don't know. You might be able to set it up in a way that like the ridges shrink as the bottle shrinks, if that makes sense. I can speak to that towards the end of this. Okay, any questions so far? All right. Again, I'm going to ask everyone to just look up and pay attention because now we're going to talk about the cap and a new feature that, again, I showed you last week, but I want to get into more depth today. So the next part of the demo asks you to select this top face. If you hit Alt-N, it rotates it so it's perpendicular to your line of sight. Alt-S creates a sketch on this face. Not best practice because now if this face disappears, the sketch is going to have an error. But for the sake of this demo and simplicity, it's okay to do that. Just be aware that that's what's happening. That you're creating a sketch that is now tied to this face. Again, thinking about that Jenga tower, it's kind of a weakness in your Jenga tower. You then take a line from the origin straight down. And again, I'll do that one more time real quick just to bring up a point out of repetition. You'll notice when the line is vertical, I get that yellow icon indicating that it's vertical, right? Can everyone see that? And then I click, and we're now working on the ridges of our sriracha bottle. I can now click this line and click for construction because I don't want it. It's just there to align my grip detail with the origin of the model. You hit O to create a circle. This circle, we want to, again, hit D to dimension it. We want the circle to be roughly 0.5 millimeter, which is 0.02. And now we want to drag this so that you could align it with this outer edge of the cap. But you want to make sure that this edge here isn't beyond this edge here. So now, in this, we're going to extrude. This is a very basic way to put grip on your caps. So all of you that have those little grip details, you're welcome to do it this way. So now we're going to extrude this circle into a cylinder. The key setting we want here is we don't want it to be blind. We want it to be up to surface. And we want it to come down up to this surface. Now here is an instance where we do want to merge the results, okay? Because this grip is part of the cap. So we want to leave this checked. What we don't want is to accidentally have this merge to this body here. So in feature scope, Auto select, it should be smart enough to just hit the cap, but to be absolutely sure, you want to uncheck this. And what that does is it gives you a box down here that says, hey, what do you want it to merge with? And here's where you select your cap. And you can go ahead and click check. And now we have the first grip detail on here. And I think that's as far as my printout goes, so I apologize for not getting farther. The new tool we're going to learn is called, it's the pattern tool. What shows up here is linear pattern, but if you click on the drop down, it's circular pattern is what we want. Obviously, we're patterning this grip detail around the circle of the top of the cap. So you can go ahead and click this. And here, once again, whatever's highlighted in blue is what it's asking you for. So here it's defaulting to a feature. Sometimes you want to pattern a body. Yes, Eminem. Say that again. Probably good practice too. For this demo, it's okay not to. The little grips probably don't need it. I won't take off points if the grip is this small and doesn't have it. I won't take off points. In some respects, I'm going against what I said because I did encourage that everything should have a fillet. So really for best practice, and you know, you could throw in a fillet at this point. Here's where it might look a bit funny though, because this is so small. Whoops. You would want this fillet also to be like pretty small. We can match it to the grip detail. So yeah, you could go ahead and throw that in if you wanted. Same thing, good question. So same thing, go to circular pattern. Again, it prompts you for the features. The best way, in my opinion, to select the features is to drop down this tree here and go ahead and select the two features that you want to pattern. After that, you want to select, it's confusing. It says direction, but really that means the center axis of rotation. I gave you guys two ways to do this last time. The most simple way is if you just select the center of the bounding box, you'll get that. The other way, sometimes you may not have that sketch or you may be patterning around something that doesn't have a sketch in there. The other way to do that is to go to View, Hide Show, and Temporary Axes. If I hide sketches just so we can absolutely see this, you can see it creates this dotted blue line in the middle of my rotated object. It will do that for any cylinder anywhere on the file. So this is another thing you can do. And you'll see if I go ahead, I can go ahead and select any of these axes, and it does it as well. But for the sake of this demo, it's enough. Just be aware that that's there. For this demo, you shouldn't need it. So I can go ahead and I can select the center line. So now we want to change the settings. And this is somewhat arbitrary. You can just select it till the grip looks about right based on your model. I mean, again, I'm just increasing the amount of grips here. Go ahead and click check. And now you have grips on your cap. At this stage, the remaining step would be to just go in and fillet, you know, the hard edges. So I might fillet the base here. This might be like 0.2. A harder fillet might be this here because it has all these little details. So let's see what happens. That was a poor decision because now the computer is going to think a long time to try and make this happen. Maybe like 0.05. Like I said, when in doubt, just go like 0.05, 0.04. That's roughly a millimeter. Another thing you can do if your grip doesn't go all the way to the top, this part here, remember that you can always have the extrudes start a little bit offset. So we can offset this extrude by like, again, by like a millimeter. You know, make sure you go in the right direction, right? It went up first, push it down. So now actually now my file might blow up, but now it won't put the fillet on it won't have the grip run up into that top edge. It appears to still have done it. So in this case, if you have it offset, I'm assuming it's because I'm still selected on this edge. It tries to complete it. You can now just select this edge. And hopefully that works. It depends on how far this is. Yeah, there you go. That's what I was trying to do. So you can have like the grip stop short of the top. It depends again on your bottles and what you're doing. Any questions on that? Okay. Finally, the last step is to, again, check the volume. So that's Alt-L, brings up volume. And again, we have two clay bodies in here. We have the cap and the bottle. I want you to check it on the bottle. So here my volume is 30.93 cubic inches. If for some reason your volume setting is not set to cubic inches, you can go to the gear here, document properties, units, and I think by switching it to inch pound, it should, yeah, it should include that. And I believe when we set up all our standards, it did that. So that's what it should be. But if for some reason it's not, when you're working on this, raise your hand, I'll come over and check, we can figure it out. But this is how I'm gonna check your work, right? So now I need to create a bottle that is twice this and half this. If I go here to the syllabus, now we're starting to look at the points for project 1. I mentioned this last time. I know none of you are excited about this, but this is the level of accuracy I'm looking for. The amount of inaccuracy you go beyond this, I'll start to take off points. That's all related to these 3 points right here. Volume, accuracy, and robust master sketch. I am weighting the master sketch heavily on this because that is the whole point of this project, is to learn how to use sketches in SolidWorks to your advantage in such a way that down the road, when you have a boss that tells you to build something and then comes back and says, you know what, can we make it like 20% smaller and 30% taller, you don't have to start the whole model over again. You can just go in, type it in, and change it. So, okay, if I do some quick math here, I'll just go, do you want to see the bottle get smaller or bigger? Any preference? Bigger, first one I heard. So plus minus 0.05 is the level of accuracy I'm looking at. So if I go back to here, again, the way you check this is Alt-L. You click on the bottle. So, okay, it's 30.93. Or we can round it to 30.94. You can double that to get, what is it, 62? 61 point, I don't feel like doing math right now. 30.94 times 2 equals 61.88. So that means plus or minus 0.05 is that anything between 61.83 and 61.93, you won't lose any points. Anything out of that, I'll start to take off like small fractions of a point. Is that clear? Does that make sense? So okay, let's try and hit that game now. So we're going to try and hit 61.88. So here's where we go to our master sketch, hit edit. By growing it wide is a very quick way to grow volume. So let's go to 2 inches. That's obviously making the overall bottle 4 inches wide. Let's change this to 7 and just like use that as our starting point. Again, checking the bottle that nothing crazy happens. We already did that step, so should be okay. Once again, Alt-L, check the bottle, way over, 73.6135. But again, because we went through the trouble to make this properly, we can now just come in here and incrementally decrease it, so 1.9. I mean, it really honestly should have been way more than that. Oh, no. Okay, yeah, 66.7. So if we went from 70 to 66, maybe another 0.1 will get us closer. I know this seems tedious. I hate to say it. This is part of SolidWorks, especially if you go into the packaging industry. You spend a decent amount of time playing this game. The good news is you often don't play this game until the very end. Okay, 60.28. We're getting really close. So now at this level, I went a little bit under. So now I can go 1.85. Check it. Okay, way over. So like 1.81. We were really close. Does this make sense to everybody? Are you all excited to do this? You can thank me later. Okay, we're still off. So 8.5 was way too much, 8.1 was too little. So this is, again, you're going back and you're changing incrementally. Say that again. You could, yes. Yeah, good point. The height will mess with it. You will affect your bottle volume quicker with width. It's just a geometric property. Height less. Um, Here you go. I'm pretty damn close now. So I'm at 61.55. Here we go. Great question. Does it matter what the bottle looks like? I will be, because I'm focusing and zeroing on this, I will be lenient. If I see something really weird happen, like clearly there shouldn't be a divot here, as long, let's look back at this. This is where I'm willing to change this a little bit. You should do that on the original bottle. When it comes to the redesign, like the double size, you'll know, okay, look in here. There is something that says design relationship between sizes. I don't like grading subjectively. Design is somewhat subjective. As long as it looks relatively close to the original bottle in some form, I'm not going to be too picky on that. Does that make sense? I am more worried about the plus or minus, the getting that zeroed in. Now, okay, for what it's worth, if you want max points, that's what this is here, plus or minus 0.05. I will try and come up with a system that's somewhat fair, that if like you're at least within like 0.5, like you won't start losing major points until you're like 0.5. But I will start to subtract points being 0.05 off, okay? Like I'm gonna do it on a scaling system. I'm not gonna do it like, oh, you're off, immediately you lose all these points. I'm gonna do it in terms of how close you are to accurate. And this is, I want you to zero in on this. So if you don't wanna lose any points on there, I want you to be this accurate. Know that if you're like being 0.5 off is gonna lose more points than being 0.1 off. I haven't figured it out yet, but I'll find some system that rewards people for being closer than further away. Yeah, Max. You won't lose any points. Yeah. Like you'll notice this is out of 3 points. So like that means each family is worth 1 point. So let's say that you're off by, if you're off by like 1 inch, you'll lose that full point, guaranteed. If you're off by like 0.1 instead of 0.05, maybe I'll take off 0.1 points. Does that make sense? I will scale it to how far off you are. I just haven't found what that is yet. No extra credit. The extra credit, I mean, 0.05 plus or minus 0.05 is basically exactly on the dot as far as I'm concerned, and your extra credit is that you get full points right here. Cool? Okay. Any questions on anything? I think I got everything, like the important stuff. So again, with caps, it is, or sorry, I asked a question and I didn't let you guys. Any questions?
So you put master and body in one master sketch, and then you just select body, like all the lines, and body.
Yep.
And you go on one sketch, and then you make another sketch where you copy master there, and then
Yep. Yep. She's saying like you have a master sketch with the bottle and the cap, then you create a new sketch, you select everything and delete the cap and revolve the bottle, then you create a new sketch and you do the opposite, delete the bottle and revolve the cap, you make sure you don't merge them. She was just going through like these first couple steps. Those I do have printed out and written for you guys, for you all. Yeah, there's different ways to go about that. Again, like Hannah said, if you have 2 separate sketches for the cap and the bottle, that's okay. I won't remove points for that. I would like to see them as 2 master sketches at the top, so that there's something to point to. Again, it's just best practice. In this demo, I have it that way because I started with this outline, and what I didn't want to happen is that this line and this line end up being a double line. That's okay too. This is my recommendation. You can definitely take slight deviations from it. The only deviation I don't want you to take from it is to completely ignore the master sketch. So I think some of you I met with after class on Monday, and you had the bounding box as a separate sketch. That's okay. That's fine. You could have a bounding box sketch, a reference image sketch, a master sketch for the bottle, and a master sketch for the cap. I won't remove points for that. If you're being nitpicky, like this is the most efficient. You have one sketch. At the bare minimum, I'm looking for a sketch of the, like a photo reference of the bottle itself, and then a master sketch that then leads into the rest of the tree. Cool. Max, you had your hand up before. I'm not sure I follow. You're asking if like a certain. I believe you can, yeah. You're saying like how many places does it show? I believe if you go here, you can tweak that. So if you wanted, you could tweak it down to just 2 decimal points. Yeah, you can change that here. So mass section properties, like you can change all of these to point to just 2 so that it rounds for you. You don't have to do that. Probably a good idea. Let's hit OK and see if that changes it. Nope. Yeah, you're right. Maybe it needs to do that. Yep. Whoever said that. Yeah. Cool. Any other questions? All right.